Good evening. I'm Molly Mansell, your librarian-elect, and I'm delighted to welcome Senator Doug Jones to the Oxford Union today. Senator Doug Jones is an American politician who served as a US Senator from Alabama from 2018 to 2021. Previously a prosecutor, he was best known for securing the convictions of two Ku Klux Klan members for the 1963 Birmingham Church bombing. Jones became the first Democrat to represent Alabama in the Senate since 1997 after defeating Republican Roy Moore, and was considered a frontrunner for the position of Attorney General in Joe Biden's administration. Senator, welcome.
Thanks, Molly. It's great to be with you. I just wish we could be together in person rather than just virtually like this. And I hope I get invited back sometime when we get through this pandemic and we can all gather again. But it's really an honor for me to be with you today, to spend just a few minutes talking about things going on in America, talking about things going on around the globe. It's been an interesting couple of 3 months for me after leaving the Senate and watching all of the crazy dynamics that are going on in Washington, D.C. right now. I would have never dreamed in my wildest imagination that we would have seen play out in Washington, D.C. at our nation's capital, what happened on January 6th, and then moving straight into the second impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. You know, now this week has been a big week for Washington, though, having put that kind of behind us. The president and Congress is about to pass, I think tomorrow, a sweeping bill to give more COVID relief. This has been a sticking point between Republicans and Democrats in Congress over the last year. It's the spring, almost a year ago, when the Congress got together and passed a $2 trillion package to start trying to make sure that we saved lives and saved livelihoods. It was a massive bill. It was the largest bill in history of the United States in terms of a spending bill. We had to do more a little bit later because money was running out for businesses, for vaccines, for healthcare workers. And then as things stalled, there was another bill that passed in the fall, but yet there were schools opening up. Our state and local governments needed more money. We needed more money for healthcare workers. We needed more money for individuals who are suffering economically because of this pandemic. But that stalled. It got involved in the American political system known as elections that we have every 4 years for President of the United States. And everything got caught up in the politics of the election season. Now that that has passed, now that Joe Biden has been sworn in and Kamala Harris has been sworn in as vice president, they passed a sweeping bill this week. The House of Representatives is set to pass it tomorrow. It'll be on the president's desk for signature this week, adding another $1.9 trillion. More money for schools, more money for healthcare workers, more money for vaccines and vaccine distribution, more money for state and local governments to be propped up, and more money for individuals and businesses. This barely made it through the Congress. Right now, the House of Representatives has barely a majority Democrats. In the Senate, it's 50-50, 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats. And any tie vote, Vice President Harris has to break that tie. This passed with a 50-49 vote, of the barest of majorities to get this done. And now the tough work really becomes for the United States Congress in trying to move forward. There are so many issues that are facing folks as we come out of this pandemic. And I'm really hopeful for the first time this week. I'm really hopeful about where things are moving in the United States in terms of the COVID crisis, but we're not out of the woods yet. No one is out of the woods yet. But as we go forward, you're going to see bills concerning immigration reform. You're going to see bills involving voting rights and voting suppression bills that are going to be introduced. There's all number of things that are going to happen in the United States Congress in the next few weeks. President Biden and his administration has taken a very active role. He wants to make sure that he runs on and delivers on the promises he made to the American people. So it is just a great pleasure to be with you today. I'm looking forward to some questions and answers because I just hit some highlights. There's an awful lot going on. I am in Alabama, in case you are wondering. I am been here since December, and we'll be here for a little bit. Sooner or later, we'll be going back and forth to Washington, D.C. with some job prospects that we've got going on. So from that point, though, Birmingham, Alabama to London. So take it away, Molly. Let's talk.
Thank you, Senator. I'm very keen to hear you talk about how we move forward in the politics of today. But let's start at the beginning. You started off in politics after law school. What made you decide that public service was the route that you wanted to take?
Well, I watched a lot of people, like a lot of young people, I think politics is something that's fascinating. And you always look and you see the prestige that politicians often carry. And it's somewhat of a thing you want to get involved because from an ego standpoint, from a personal standpoint, this is what I'd like to do. But for me, having the opportunity to work for the late Senator Howell Heflin from Alabama in the Senate, and then as an assistant U.S. attorney, I really saw what public service can do for people, do good things for people. We did a lot of wonderful things when I was that 1 year that I worked as a Senate staffer for Senator Heflin. And then as an assistant U.S. attorney, later on, I was appointed by President Clinton as the United States attorney. And in those roles, you really get a sense that holding an office is really public service. It's not a public office holder. I tell people all the time to go into public service for the right reason, for service. It's not about you, but it's about the people you serve. And so I think I had some great mentors that really helped show me the way that you can do things, good things for your community. And it really instilled in me the desire to be in public service, to do those kind of things that I can to help my communities. And I think we accomplished a lot in my 3 years in the Senate. We also accomplished a lot in my 4 years as the United States Attorney in Birmingham. But again, it's all about service. It really is all about service. And I think too many times, at least in the United States, people get these offices and they hold these offices and they'll do anything to hold on to the office. No office is worth that to me. You've got to not sell your soul. You got to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, for the right people.
Thank you. And as attorney, you led the successful prosecution of 2 Ku Klux Klan members. In your book, you wrote that this changed the course of civil rights. Could you talk a bit more about that case and the significance that it had?
Sure. It was a remarkable case. I was 9 years old when that bomb blew up at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham in 1963, killed 4 young Black girls who were going to church that day to participate in a youth worship service. They were killed simply because of the color of their skin. Birmingham was a lot different then than it is now. So much of America is so much different today than it was then. Segregated schools, segregated churches, you name it. It was a segregated society. And as things were progressing, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan and others were seeing their way of life kind of sliding away and they didn't like it. And that's why they bombed this church. A lot of people forget that this church was bombed just a few days after the Birmingham school system was integrated for the first time. Before September of 1963, Black kids and white kids did not go to school together. And the courts ordered that desegregation, and it began just days before this bombing. And I believe that in large part, this bombing was in response to that, in response to kids being the focal point of the movement. And it really did change the course. This was September of 1963. Before that, you had seen fire hoses and dogs attacking peaceful Black demonstrators in the city of Birmingham. You saw the murder of Medgar Evers in Mississippi. You saw the what we call the stand in the schoolhouse door with the segregationist governor, George Wallace, trying to block 2 Black kids from attending the University of Alabama, where I would ultimately go to school. Things were moving and things were changing. And when that bomb blew up, when that bomb killed those 4 kids, the ripple effect went around the world. People asked why, how could this happen? And it did change. It changed everything. It woke up the conscience of the Congress and of the president who, after President Kennedy's assassination, 2 months later, they passed a sweeping civil rights bill. And then a year after that, a voting rights bill. People began to change. They saw just the horror of what Jim Crow can do. Jim Crow meaning the segregationist laws that were in place at the time. And it really did start, I believe, the kind of a snowball effect of change in this country that went on for decades. But it went unsolved up until 1977, when an Alabama attorney general decided he was going to prosecute one member of the Klan, guy named Robert Chambliss. And I was a 24-year-old law student and cut classes and went and sat in on the trial, never dreaming that 24 years after that, I would be the United States attorney, charged with responsibility. And we reopened that case. We spent 2 or 3 years investigating it, going back, looking at the old evidence, trying to determine, what we could piece together in terms of any physical evidence, eyewitness evidence. At the end of the day, we indicted 2 people, a fellow named Tommy Blanton and a fellow named Bobby Frank Cherry. We tried them separately. Both were convicted. And it was an amazing process to go through. The healing process was tremendous for this community, that they finally saw justice. The families finally saw justice. And across the country, across the United States, people saw Alabama in a different light, that we finally had achieved something that hadn't been achieved for decades. And they really saw Alabama not in the old black and white images of fire hoses and dogs, but in the living color which we enjoy in this state. We're not perfect by any stretch, and we still got a long way to go. And there's still some backsliding we have in this country on civil rights and voting rights. But that was a monumental event. It was one of the greatest things that I'll ever do. I still think securing those convictions for the murder of those 4 children are as the crowning moment of my career. And it is not something that can be duplicated easily.
And did the relevance of the case and sort of its weight play on your mind whilst you were working on it?
Well, it did. It always does. The burden of history is always weighing on your mind. We knew that if we tried this and lost, it could be a potential setback in Birmingham. There were folks that were telling me I should not do it because the case was so old. There, so many of the witnesses or potential witnesses had died, and others were getting older and their memories were fading. And so it was it was not a surefire bet that we could win these cases. A lot of people had said, don't do it, Doug. You've got a promising career of some type in front of you, whether it's legal, political. Why take the chance? But at the end of the day, I knew this community needed something. See, back in the 60s, we all knew that the case didn't get prosecuted because there was no political will to do it. Either state or federal authorities. And it's probably a good thing, because had they prosecuted the cases in state court, which is where we did this, these defendants would have likely been found not guilty because of the prejudices of the juries at the time. And under the Constitution, that would have been a double jeopardy if we tried to prosecute them again. And so it was probably well that they didn't do it. But there were so many people that felt like that the FBI and local law enforcement didn't do their job. And it was a sore spot, and it was a sore spot that needed some healing. And I told folks when I first got into office and the case was reopened that I don't know if we can prosecute this case, but we owe it to the people of this city. We owe it to the people of the state, and we owe it to these families to look at it and give it a try, to see whether or not we can make it. If we can't, I'll stand before the cameras and tell and explain to folks why we can't do it. But if we can, and if there's any hope that we can get convictions in the case, then we should go for it. We should take the chance, and we should do whatever it takes. We did a lot of work with our juries and focus groups, and we felt very good going in that we could get the convictions. And at the end of the day, we were able to do it. And it did achieve exactly what I thought. A lot of healing for not only the folks in this state, in this city, but across the country. Anytime you can achieve justice decades later, everybody feels better about your systems.
And after leaving the office of US Attorney, you returned to private practice, but I guess it was your desire to serve that brought you back to politics again. Did you expect to win when you ran for senator?
That's hard to say. I knew we had a path to victory, and as we got closer, I really felt like we were going to win the election. Things just it fell into place just right. I mean, I had been telling people, friends of mine, for a long time, Alabama is a tough place to run as a Democrat, and it was getting tougher by the day. And I'd had a number of people talk to me about whether or not they should run. And I encourage folks to run, knowing that they might not win the race, because I wanted to build a system where we built a Democratic Party in Alabama. And I told him, I said, you may not win, but you're building for the next person and the next and the ones after that. And that's what I thought was important. Well, when it came time for this special election, I had a lot of those same people calling me up and saying, look, Doug, this is really your time. You started in the Senate. You love the Senate. You've had senators in your home doing fundraisers. Your kids are now in college, and it's time for you to get back in the fray. And because you're really got, as a Democrat, maybe the only platform that somebody could run on and name recognition to run on. So when we opened up, we knew there was a path to win, no matter who the Republican nominee was, to a special election. And that always gives you the opportunities that you wouldn't have in a general election. To say I expected to win, it's hard for me to say. One day I'd wake up and I'd say, we got this. The next day I'd go, oh me, oh woe is me. What am I going to do when I lose to this guy? At the end of the day, though, everything just felt just right. It was one of the most incredible last couple of days and one of the most incredible evenings of our lives. It also was my wife's Louise, our 25th wedding anniversary. So it was really special all the way around.
It was a really eventful election. I mean, during that election, various National Republican Party figures chose to withdraw their endorsement of your opponent, Roy Moore, following the revelation of sexual assault allegations against him, but they reinstated their endorsements once President Trump decided to stand by them. How do you think that the now former president's decision to stand by Roy Moore and the falling in line of the Republican Party reflects on them and on him?
Well, I think it reflects very poorly on both of them. I mean, to stand by someone with those kind of allegations that were never disproven, that were very serious. And as a lawyer, I believed them. I didn't address those allegations very much. I didn't really need to. The only thing I said is that, these women need to be heard. These allegations appear to be truthful. I believe them, and he never really addressed them at all. But it just goes to show you sometimes that, especially in today's world of politics in the United States, that political parties and loyalty is more important than even ethics or professionalism or morality sometimes. And I think for the Republican National Committee decided to come back in at the last minute because they did not want to lose that Senate seat. There was some talk that if they wouldn't even seat him, if he had run the race. And I believe there were a lot of people that voted for Moore thinking that he wouldn't get seated and they would have another election and they'd get another opportunity. But I just think that, there are times they didn't have to, no one had to, in the Republican Party had to endorse me. I didn't expect that. In fact, probably didn't want it at the time. But to throw their support behind and endorse somebody with his history, and it wasn't just the allegations. I mean, that was the culmination of a sordid past. He was homophobic. He had racist comments, in my opinion. He got kicked out of office twice. There were a lot of reasons not to endorse this guy, and that doesn't mean they had to endorse me. It was very disappointing to see that they would go as far as they did. And we were very fortunate to win the race by the skin of our teeth.
Moore also refused to concede once you'd won and called for an investigation into voter fraud. Could you tell us more about that experience? And especially, I mean, you spoke about the Capitol riots. Did that influence the way that you viewed Trump's allegations after the 2020 election?
Well, I think there were separate issues. More if you refused to concede, but that's okay. I really didn't give a damn about talking to him anyway. He had his own reasons, but there was no there was no even investigation. There were no lawsuits got filed. It was pretty clear that the election had been as clean as it could be. Republican office holders in Alabama certified the elections, made a lot of public comments, all very similar to what we saw. It's just that Roy Moore didn't have the bully pulpit of the president of the United States, and therein lies the difference. He didn't have that following. There were probably people that followed Moore that thought the election was stolen too because it was so close. But the fact is, Donald Trump's in a league of his own. He's in a completely different league when it comes to giving these false narratives about this election. And he got people believing it, smart people, good people that believe it. Not people that went and rioted in the Capitol, but people all around that still believe that there was a problem with the election simply because he did not win. And I think that played in. Certainly, there is an element in this country that when you do things, you play into, and it stokes violence. You know, I liken this happened on January 6th back to the church bombing in 1963, because in those days, you had in Alabama, you had a fiery governor who said things that what we call dog whistle politics. It was that silent message to folks that you can commit violence in the name of trying to stop civil rights and stopping desegregation, and it'll be okay. And it was okay. No one was ever prosecuted for so long. But those same kind of dog whistle politics, I think, were part of President Trump's plan. And people got that message, and they came in droves to the Capitol that day, to the Capitol of the United States in Washington, D.C. And then when he said, let's all go to the Capitol, they headed over there. And it was truly a tragic and sad day for the United States of America.
How do you think we move away from this division and this approach to politics that we're seeing in the US today?
Well, I think it's going to take a few people to stand up and have some profiles and courage, as the late President John F. Kennedy wrote. I think people are going to have to stand up, and they're going to have to speak out to call out the lies and to not promulgate the lies. I think you saw that to some extent in the impeachment trial, where you had 7 Republicans who actually voted to convict former president of inciting that riot. But people are going to have to stand up. Right now, the problem that I see is a couple of things, folks. One, in the Congress of the United States and throughout the 50 states in state legislators, they've so drawn district lines, what we call gerrymandered these district lines, such that they're solid Republican or they're solid Democrats. And so the incentive to work together is just really not there if your main incentive is to get reelected. And so we've got to get away from those gerrymandered lines a lot. I think if we can do that, then I think we'll go a long way to working together. But the other thing is too, I think we have to go back to what we were talking about earlier, is why you're there. Why are you a member of Congress? Why are you in the United States Senate? And it's there to serve people. It's not there to serve your own interest. It's not there to get a pension. It's not there for you can just to stay there for the rest of your life. It's to serve people. And you serve people by working together, reaching across the aisle, sometimes within your own party, to bring people together. So we're going to need people to just really, dig deep down and see what's going to be best for the American people. And it should not be the stridency that we see right now. People really need to try to respect each other more and reach across and try to figure out ways where you can find common ground and move forward. And that's, I believe, it's going to take a lot. And I worry that as we move forward, that the presence of Donald Trump is going to inhibit that, because he certainly, as his candidacy and his presidency, certainly stoked the divisions even further. So if that can just be set aside, I think can come a long way. And let me say this too, and with the disclaimer that he has been a friend of mine for 40 years, I think that there was no one better positioned in American leadership than Joe Biden to lead and do just that. That has been his entire history of working with people to get things done.
Can you tell us more about how you approach your political decisions? So you're in office to serve people, but do you see yourself as a representative of your state first, or your party, or your own moral compass?
Well, I certainly don't see it as a representative of a party. I think that parties are there because they you generally agree on a lot of the same things and a lot of the goals and aspirations and the way you approach things. But I don't think loyalty to the party was not something that really was very high on my list at all. What was high on my list was trying to do those things that I felt like in the long run were in the state and the country's best interest. People may disagree with the method of getting there, but that is generally what my guiding principle was. You couple that, and right there with that, you have to have your own moral compass. That, I think, guides you throughout in your deliberations, and however you're approaching a particular issue. Your moral compass is going to lead you one way or another. And I had told my campaign staff, I told my Senate staff, I want to make the decisions that we've got to make on tough issues based on the facts and what's going to be in the best interest of the state and the country, and what I can live with as a public office holder personally. And I told my staff, I said, I never want you, when we're debating the issues internally, and that's what I enjoyed a lot in my own office. There's an interesting story, by the way, about the impeachment vote that if we can get to, I'll tell you. But I told folks, let's research, let's debate these issues internally. And at the end of the day, the thing that I do not want to hear is, I do not want anyone to say, well, Senator, you need to vote this way or that way because it's the best politics for you in Alabama. My staff knew to not talk to me about that. And we didn't. We based them all on what we felt like, after doing an incredible amount of research, this was the best thing, the best avenue for us. And that was always going to be consistent with my personal moral compass and my personal beliefs.
You were the first Democrat elected to the Senator of Alabama in 25 years. It may have not changed your policies, but it did change the way that you packaged or presented your views.
It presented, yes. Packaged, no. But presented, yes, because I was able to have a platform to talk about those views more. One of the problems that I've seen in my state was that Democrats were too shy to talk about those values that really help pull up the middle class in Alabama and across the country. Things that like the 40-hour work week, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those things that meant so much to poor people. Alabama's a poor state, and we're an unhealthy state. And so I tried to use those values and with my bully pulpit to talk about those values, to get people talking and thinking about their vote with regard to those values. I called them the kitchen table issues. Those that those issues that you talk about around your kitchen table every night with your spouse or your parents or your loved ones. Those are the issues that I think the Democratic Party in Alabama had gotten away from, and now put them back on the table. So we tried to do that, and we're still doing that. Even though I lost the election in 2020, we made tremendous strides in this state, and we're going to be competitive as Democrats going forward.
I think we'd both like to talk about the impeachment, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Before we do, I'd just like to remind our audience that there will be time for some audience questions at the end of this talk, so please do submit them using the Q&A function on Zoom. But yeah, Senator Jones, the impeachment.
Well, there were two. I was involved in one. And, we could talk for a long time about it. I will tell you, as a lawyer in private practice, I did a lot of whistleblower cases. I represented whistleblowers, but also defended companies and individuals that had whistleblower complaints filed against them. So I knew a little bit about it. And I told my staff back in September, when I saw the first whistleblower complaint about Ukraine, to get ready, that this is very serious. And if there is any truth to what's in that complaint, this is likely to come over to the Senate from the House. So we began building my file just like I would do as a lawyer, whether I was a defense lawyer or a prosecutor. We started building. I assigned 2 people to work on it. We would meet on it every week. They would give me things. I would bring things home with me on the plane. I went so far as disguising some things on the plane because I didn't want people to know I was reading about impeachment when I was on the plane. But we did a tremendous amount of work. So by the time it got to us in the Senate, we were going to be prepared. We had a good idea about what the facts were, and we wanted to see how the trial would unfold. I advocated for getting witnesses. I wrote an op-ed to the Washington Post to try to get witnesses. Unfortunately, we didn't have those. But I'll tell you the most interesting thing, going back to the question about how you make decisions and my staff, the way we would argue. We left on a 2-week break before the articles of impeachment came over, but there'd been so much publicity. The facts were generally known. And so I had my 6 members of my leadership team in my office come into my office, and I had note cards. I had 6 note cards prepared and had folded up. And on 3 of them, I had written the words guilty. And on 3, I had written the words not guilty. And I made them draw a card, just like drawing straws. And I wanted them 3 days later, whatever they drew, if they drew guilty, I wanted them to come back and tell me why Donald Trump was guilty. And the ones not guilty, tell me why he wasn't. It was an incredible exercise to kind of get everybody thinking about the nuances of the prosecution as well as the defense. At the end of the day, I sat through that trial and I approached it like I did. I wanted to be one of the lawyers and ask questions, and I couldn't do that. But I took a lot of notes. I probably took over 400 pages of notes because that's just what I do in my trials. I write it. I get highlighters, red markers and star things. And at the end of the day, to me, the evidence was fairly clear and overwhelming that he was guilty of obstruction of Congress, and then he was guilty of abusing his process with regard to Ukraine. It was one of those decisions that I knew was going to hurt me politically. But I believed then and I believe now it was the right thing to do. And I probably have a firmer belief in that now after what we saw happen following the election.
I wanted to ask you how your political positions have changed during your career and during your lifetime, and whether there have been any moments, maybe just describe one now, which have just really changed the way that you think about things.
That's an interesting question. And I think a lot of things have you just evolve. I know that growing up, my household was a pretty conservative household in the 1960s and early 1970s. I grew up in a time when it was both civil rights and then anti-war, the anti-Vietnam War. There was a lot of student protests, a lot of things going on. And I know this harkens back a long time ago, but there were 4 kids, just like the kids that were killed in a bombing in 1963. On May 4th, which had happened to be my birthday in 1970, there were 4 kids killed at Kent State by state troopers and they were peacefully protesting. And everyone around me was always in favor. They always put law and order, and they felt like that those kids that got killed were in the wrong. I did a high school project, and I determined that was not the case. These kids were just basically murdered. And it really changed a lot of me. And I know, I'll be 67 this May. And to think back that was an important event for me at that time, that I knew that get the facts. Don't just rely on what you're hearing, get the facts. Read for yourself, do the homework, do those things necessary, because it changed my mind 180 degrees. And from there, it's been an evolution. I mean, watching others, seeing the importance of civil rights, seeing the importance of voting rights, seeing the effect it has, understanding that we still have so far to go, and believing that equality means just that, equality for everybody. As I've gone and I've seen more and more, when you see the wrongs, you want to right those wrongs. When you see injustice, you want to try to seek justice. That's what I've tried to do in my life, in my career. And I'm hoping I'll get some other opportunities down the road.
You've spoken about the importance of mentors. What advice would you give now yourself to the student who's currently making their high school project?
I would say, do the work. Don't just pick up a phone or a computer and understand and believe the first thing that you read. Find out for yourself. Be inquisitive. Ask the questions. Be respectful, but ask the questions. Understand where it is. Don't be afraid to change your mind, to look at these issues from all sides. My favorite book, as you could probably imagine, is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, who is from Alabama, and the mythical Atticus Finch. And Atticus Finch always tells folks to see things from another person's point of view, to walk around in their shoes, walk around in their skin, see things from their point of view. That's what I would say to do. Don't be so dogmatic that you refuse to budge, that you can't see things from other people's point of view. understand that the only way that you can find common ground and to move forward is to talk and to listen and to understand. And then that way, I think anybody can have success. It doesn't matter whether you're going into law, you're going into medicine, you're going into public service. It's that I think is the most important aspect of being successful.
And I hate to ask this, but do you think there was a particular reason for your loss in 2020? A lot of people said that sort of there was no way that a Democrat could consistently hold that seat. What do you think needs to change for that to change?
Well, we knew that it was going to be an uphill battle all the time. And I knew that going into it that I would probably not win this race, that lightning would really have to strike. But I also knew that we'd built a base and a foundation. I knew that Donald Trump was going to bring out a lot of votes that didn't vote in 2017 or 2018. And that was going to be very difficult to overcome. But we built a base of votes, and we're still working. We're still doing things. We've rebuilt the Democratic Party in Alabama. We've got a lot of base out there. I got more votes than any Democrat in the history of this state had ever gotten before. And our job now is to keep them and to build on that. And I think we can do that, but we can only do it if we continue to be authentic, say the things that we believe and not worry about it. And you can talk to people, get them to understand where you're coming from. Because I think the thing that really hurt the most is that so many people in the state have been voting Republican for so long. They were conditioned to that, and they didn't really focus on the issues that I had been working on for them. If they had of, I think they would have seen things in a different light. But I had 3 more years. I could have done that. It's really tough to run after 3 years, but we've still got a long way to go in this state. But I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had. I'm thankful for the opportunity to build, and we're going to continue to do that going forward. It's just going to be a tough road for us for a while. We know that, but we're up to that challenge.
What do you think the priority is for Democrats going forward?
I think priority's got to be people. The first priority is people. The second priority is people. The third priority is people. I think that what you just saw happen in the Congress of the United States clearly demonstrates that the party is going to put people first, whether it is on COVID relief or small businesses. The economy. There's an article I read just the other day where Joe Biden is staking the economic recovery on the recovery of the middle class and the low income people in this country. I think that that's the way to go. I think that the party will continue to help give those supports for folks that are in need, but at the same time, help lift them out of poverty, to build up, to get more jobs that are going to be, to go to those folks who need it the most. That's where I think the success of the Democratic Party will lie. At the same time, we've also got to rebuild relationships. I think that, again, I think Joe Biden is best positioned as anybody in the country to be in a position of rebuilding the relationships that we've got in Europe and across the globe. I think they have been damaged greatly over the last 4 years. And I think he has an opportunity because that's a passion that's been his forever. And the Democratic Party will be right there. We want to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity.
Some audience questions now. Claire Harris of Somerville says, do you think that you've had more of an impact as a prosecutor or as a politician so far, and why?
It's hard to say. I think there are a little bit different impacts. Clearly the conviction of those 2 cases resonated a lot and made people help people see Alabama in a different light, brought a lot of healing. On the other hand, I will have to say, and I try to say this with all degree of modesty, the election in 2017 gave people a lot of hope around this country. That if Alabama could elect a Democrat that shot straight, that talked about things that you don't expect to hear, common sense gun reform to reduce gun violence, women's rights, equal protection, civil rights, those kind of things. It gave people a lot of hope. It was more than I bargained for, to be honest with you, but it's the same thing that we tried to carry forward. So I'm hoping that ultimately that what we started in 2017 is continuing to grow throughout the South and the heartland of America. where people have the ability to talk to each other, to find that common ground, to understand that civility and respect still mean something in politics, or they should mean something in politics. And so I think ultimately it will hopefully be the latter part, but I'll tell you, Molly, you can never underestimate the significance of those two convictions.
Thank you. Dr. Laura Smith from St. Anne's College says, as the effects of African-American women were particularly important in your election, how do we ensure these groups can stay politically active and have the traditional Alabama black belt represented by the Democrats?
Well, that's two different questions. Clearly, I think that the way you continue to get people active is to make sure that you demonstrate to them that their vote matters. In other words, when I was in the Senate, I did so many things to make sure that Black women in the state knew that I was there for them, whether it is on maternal health issues, education issues, things that mattered to that constituency. We were right there. We spent so much time trying to make sure that the folks that I knew helped put me in office knew that they had a voice. And that's the most important thing. You can't always get the legislation passed, but when people know that they've got a voice, somebody that's going to stand up for them and speak out for them and advocate for them, that's really important. And so I think the way to keep folks engaged is to elect folks that are going to continue to be those advocates for people. Because when you're an advocate, or later the change will come. In the Black Belt of Alabama, it's going to be difficult. We have one member of Congress who is from Selma, Alabama, a Black female, Terry Sewell, great friend. We don't know if we'll lose a congressional seat or not. What we've got to do in the Black Belt is not just for representation. We got to get jobs and businesses down there. People are leaving the Black Belt area. People are leaving rural areas in Alabama. And we've got to get broadband across the state. I was in a program just last week about broadband. We've got to do those things to where kids are not leaving those rural areas, but staying and helping build them up. That'll help the Black Belt. It'll help everyone in Alabama. But I think being an advocate is going to be the most important thing to keep people engaged. My biggest challenge in Alabama is getting young people engaged. It's the young people who think that their vote doesn't count. It's younger voters who believe that it's just too hard to vote and they've got too many things to do to go stand in line for a couple of hours. So we're really going to spend a lot of time engaging young people, but Black and white, to get engaged in the political process and vote.
And Will Jones, a fellow Alabaman, asks what advice you have for young Alabama progressive or Democrats who want to run, whether that be for local or statewide elections.
Well, I would say run. Don't stop running. But run again, like I said earlier, run for the right reasons. Run because there are things that you see in your community that can be better off, that you can advocate for, and you can do those things. Do not be ashamed to run on the democratic values. Do not run away from those. Run for the right reasons, and let's get engaged. From one end of the state to the other, people are mobilized, and it's going to take a lot to kind of change the state to be a more progressive state. But we're getting there. The demographics of this state are changing. There's so much that we've got in our favor. The other thing I would say is to make sure when I talk about running for the right reasons and running on the right platforms is simply something that Joe Biden told me many years ago. Don't ask yourself, what can I say to win the election? Ask yourself, what is it I'm prepared to say? What is it I will say in which I'm prepared to lose? That's the real test. Making sure that you stay in that moral compass stays true to who you are, because sooner or later, you're going to have an effect. Whether you win or the next person wins, it's going to have an effect.
Thank you. Al Pfeffer says, given your experience with the Alabama bombing trial and seeking justice against racism through the courts, do you think that the courts are the best location for seeking justice? If not currently, what practical reforms should we be looking for?
That's a really great question. I think that the courts are one platform for seeking justice. That's why they're there, whether it's a civil case or whether it's a criminal case. And that depends on a lot of factors. It depends on the state law, the federal laws, Depends on the judge sometimes and their views, because it's just like I said, you know, one person's justice is somebody else's injustice. And so that's a term that we got to deal with sometimes. And the courts are there for that purpose. But I also think that there are ways that justice can be done in everyday life. I think justice can be done in healthcare, in education. And I think bridging those divides. I'm doing a course right now, an 8-week discussion at Georgetown University Institute of Politics and Policy. And my title of my discussion is Justice in America, Bridging the Divides. And so I think if you see the division in the United States or anywhere, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it is in education or business or healthcare, bridging those divides, I think, in any form will help with curing injustice. It will minimize the injustices that exist in those areas. So you don't have to be in a court. You don't have to be in a legislature or a governor or a senator. You just got to be out there active, and you got to just be dogged in the pursuit of bridging those divides and seeking the justice. It could be in any field. Educators do a great job, I think, of bridging those divides and creating, because the ripple effect goes forth. That's what I would do. Look at what you're passionate about, and you can see the divides and you can see where the injustices, and go for it.
And finally, I'll end with a question that we've asked all of our speakers. What is one thing that we should be thinking about which we're not thinking about at the moment?
I really think that we need to be thinking about where our social media is headed. Maybe we are thinking about it, but I'm just not sure we're thinking about it enough, because we've let technology outgrow, in my view, technology has far outgrown our ability to deal with it. We use it in horrible ways. We use it in some good ways, but we use it in some horrible ways in platforms. And people do things in social media that they would never do in person. And I don't want to control the internet. I don't want to control social media, but I think we need to be thinking about how best to set up platforms for facts. The thing that we're not doing enough of in the United States is having a common set of facts to deal with. I think that we can do that through social media. And that's probably not a real deep answer, and maybe even somewhat superficial. But I really think that that social media is a huge problem right now, because the way it's abused. I think we've seen that with a former president of the United States. And I think that filters down. And I think we've got to be rethinking the whole social media platforms in the sense of how they can be used for good and not bad and not evil. And while we may be talking about it, I just don't know if we're talking about it enough right now when it really boils down to it.
Senator Jones, thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. It's been an absolute honor to host you, and I'm sure you've left our audience with lots more questions, especially those who will be coming to the meet and greet later. And you're completely right. We'd love to host you in person when we're able. You've definitely passed your audition. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. I'm looking forward to coming and see you guys at some point. Thank you very much. Enjoy it.
Thank you, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.